Hi there, I'm Kevin Gentry, and welcome to the Going Big podcast, where we explore the strategies and stories behind transforming your effectiveness by 10xing your fundraising and marketing. Each week, I'll be sitting down with some of the most influential business leaders, CEOs, and nonprofit visionaries to talk about leadership, the power of giving, and how to make a real impact. If you're ready to go big and to elevate your organization to new heights, you're in the right place. You can find the Going Big podcast on Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and YouTube. And don't forget to follow us on social media and visit our website, 10x Strategies, TENX Strategies.com, for some great free resources. Let's dive in. And today I'm really honored and pleased to have a discussion with my good friends, Trevor and Tarren Bragdon. They are well known, I know, to many of you who are joining today. They have an excellent new book, an Amazon bestseller, Seven-Figure Fundraising, which is a play on the concept and the training program that they developed several years ago, which is just superb. And I want to dig in. I want to invite you to join through the chat. If you have questions, I'll try to monitor that. But I want to jump in. We're going to start with Tarren. Tarren, you have an amazing story. Back in several years ago, 2021, I can't remember. You went from Maine to Florida to start the Foundation for Government Accountability with a $50,000 grant, and you've turned it into a $15 million a year annual revenue serious operation. I know many folks remember you from your days as the head of the Maine Heritage Policy Center in Maine. You were the youngest member of the Maine state legislature, but you moved to Florida and are doing this great stuff, but really have been successful in fundraising along the way. And you're speaking from experience. So kick us off. What do you see as the biggest challenges for fundraisers today?
Well, Kevin, first, just thanks for the opportunity to have this conversation. It's great to be talking to folks in the nonprofit world and people who are passionate about mission-driven work. And it's a lot easier to accomplish that big vision if you're able to fundraise. And you talked about my own journey from Maine to Florida back in 2011. And I think, for me, one of the biggest challenges of fundraising is nobody ever teaches you about fundraising. You're really focused on doing the good work and kind of believing that the money will follow if you just execute on providing a quality product or service. But what we find is a lot of times folks are doing that good work, but they really struggle with how do you describe what you're doing and the impact that you're having in a way that's compelling to donors. And how do you stand out? If I'm not able to stand out to a donor or a potential donor, there are 50 other nonprofits behind me who are happy to take that opportunity. And so what we want to do and what we've been able to really do is look at how do you stand out and how do you present your organization in a clear and compelling way so that donors really understand. One of the things that I think is a challenge with nobody teaching you how to fundraise is if you're not directly learning, then you're trying to pick up nuggets kind of from across the internet or little tidbits along the way. And you see these high profile things like the Ice Bucket Challenge from a few years ago. And you have kind of these visual and viral examples of great fundraising. And you can get lulled into thinking, okay, that's what I need to do. Like, I need to think up the next big thing that goes viral rather than I need to kind of grind it out in a proven system and strategy and be compelling and concise. You don't have to be viral, but you do have to be clear and compelling. And there's a whole structure of how to do that. And the truth is, that nobody's born a great fundraiser. I certainly wasn't born a great fundraiser. I can tell you a story a year in of almost going bankrupt. And so definitely wasn't born a great fundraiser. And, Trevor has this great clip that I think showcases how a lot of times most of us feel when we're starting out in fundraising or when we're really struggling with fundraising. It kind of feels like this video clip. So that's the donor or prospect. That's us as a fundraiser, dressed like Oliver Twist.
Please, sir, I want some more. What? Please, sir, I want some more.
You know, sometimes fundraising can feel like you're asking for scraps from the master's table or crumbs from the master's table, and you're kind of the supplicant to a donor. And that's just not the way to think about it. The way to think about it is fundraising is just a skill. And like any skill, you can work on it and you can improve it. And what you need to do to really understand and become a great fundraiser is you need to understand it at a really big picture level. And then it's kind of the ground level with specific tactics. And that's why I'm really excited about this book.
Thanks, Tarren. And I'm so glad you emphasized that there's no silver bullet. That's a great insight. I think oftentimes we end up with 10,000 different fundraising ideas. And for whatever reason, everyone we know thinks they know how to do fundraising and wants to share their new ideas about what we should do. The Ice Bucket Challenge is a great illustration. I'm so glad that y'all are thinking about this through specific strategic frameworks, and that makes such a big difference. So that's a great way to pivot to your brother. Trevor, thank you for what you're doing. I so appreciate it. I think it was 2017. You all started seven-figure fundraising as a training vehicle, and then you decided to write this book. And I know you have a background not only in politics and grassroots work, but a lot of analytics, a lot of behavioral science. I know that's your academic background. Why did you decide to take the training and convert it into this terrific new book?
Well, thanks again for having us on, Kevin. And we were really excited to write this book because what we've seen over the last 7 years doing seven-figure fundraising is we keep asking this question of people who come through our training, which is, what fundraising books do you use or do you give to your team? And what we found out is people actually talk about like marketing books, like the books you talk about in the fundraising tips. They talk about Influence by Cialdini. They talk about the 22 immutable laws of marketing that you talk about throughout the year. But nobody really talks about one specific guide to how do you grow major donor fundraising. And if there are some books, it's usually about one small like tactical area on how you do it. So what we wanted to do is really set out to create a comprehensive guide on here's how to understand major donor fundraising so that you know where to grow, like how to grow your fundraising, what to focus on, like where specifically, as the leader of the organization, as a development director, as support staff, what to focus on, and then also what sort of team you should have in place so you don't have to do it on your own. And what's been cool about doing this over the last, I guess it's 7 years now, since 2017, is we've seen a lot of fundraisers who were very passionate about what they did. Like they loved the mission of their nonprofit, and then they get promoted into these leadership roles and they have to learn fundraising on the job. And so we had this one lady who came through our very first training, and at the time, her nonprofit was raising about $250,000 a year. She was a founder, she'd like figured out some stuff, but really had felt like she was stuck at this level. And by using this program, by really focusing on having a compelling pitch, really figuring out how do I treat donors differently, her nonprofit raises about $1.5 million a year. And the cool thing is, she was telling us the other day about how she actually got this summer an unsolicited donation for $250,000, which was her entire budget, just 7 years ago. And that came in because donors in her community, in her area, know the great work that she's doing. So I think that's one of the powers of really getting good at fundraising. If you raise money, everything else is easier in your organization, but it allows you to do more work and have a bigger impact, which is what all of us are doing if you're working in the nonprofit space. I mean, most fundraisers could earn a lot more money as salesmen in the corporate world, but they do it because they're really driven by the mission. So our goal with the book was to create a really easy to follow, easy to understand guide, try to make it very readable, like conversational, not like a dense textbook, and keep it short enough that you could read it on a flight. So it's short, it's 127 pages, but really gets to the point, lots of actionable advice on every page.
Great, thank you. Yes, it's very accessible. I love it, and it is a good, quick, but substantive read. So let's get into some of those particulars that you hinted at. Tarren, a very important question. How do you grow your fundraising?
So thanks for asking that question, because that really is what we all want to know. I think sometimes we think the nonprofit world is a different kind of business, and it is in some ways, but it's also a business. And like every business, there are three significant levers of revenue growth, or in the nonprofit world, three significant levers of fundraising growth. And that's grow, keep, and add. So let's just quickly go through these. So lever number one, and these are in priority order, is grow. You want to have a way, a system, to get your existing donors to give more. So these are people who are already committed to your mission. They're already excited about working with you. What you need to do is inspire them of, if you gave more, here's what we would be able to accomplish together. And we talk through in the book exactly how you do that, how you lay out a concise but compelling pitch or high stakes presentation to inspire them to give more so that you can grow. So that's lever number one. Lever number two is keep. This sounds really basic, but this is all about donor retention. And I think sometimes fundraising can feel like a treadmill, because you're bringing new donors in and they're just going out the back door just as quickly. And so you feel like you're constantly running, but you're not actually getting anywhere. In fact, the truth is the average nonprofit has less than a 50% retention rate. Or put another way, they lose half of their donors each year. So you feel like you're on a treadmill, because you are. And what you want to do is instead kind of create the Hotel California, where donors come to you, but they never leave. And you keep those donors and then inspire them to give more. So you're building your base every year. You're not just constantly replacing the donors that leave and staying put, if you will. And we walk through how you keep your donors and develop that compelling partnership. And then lever number three is adding new donors. I think a lot of times this gets the primary focus for folks in the fundraising world that has a lot of sex appeal. It's important to add new donors because you won't have 100% retention, but it's actually the last lever to worry about. And we go through what are some specific strategies of getting new donors. And how do you do that? Primarily through referrals or kind of warm leads to add some of those new donors, because that's really key. And as you add them and keep them, then you can grow them over time, and it becomes this whole virtuous cycle. So just like with any business, it's all about getting current customers to buy more, current donors to give more. It's about getting those current customers to buy again, if you will. And it's about adding in some new customers. So it's that grow, keep, add formula that works so well.
Well, that's great. It's a very simple formula, not easy, but simple. Appreciate that you laid it out in that way. And I think it's important you made a couple of points. One is it is just natural for attrition to occur. People die, people move away, their financial circumstances change, their personal circumstances change, their interests change, whatever it may be. It's gonna happen. You cannot keep sustaining the same support year after year after year. So you have to add as you grow that existing support. Once somebody gives a second time, that's big, because they're then likely to give a third and a fourth and a fifth time. But that stuff is so important. And I think it's extremely important too, which you point out, Tarren, that the only way that you're really going to grow over time is by adding more than you're losing. It's building that bigger base of support. Yes, as people are increasing their support to you over time, as they build trust in what you're doing and really appreciate what you're doing, it is offset by those who are leaving for other circumstances. But if you grow and add more to your platform, you're drawing from a bigger base over time. Great stuff. Okay, so that's a great pivot to Trevor. How do you put this into action?
So great question, Kevin. It's really focused on three big areas. So these can line up with each of those levers that Tarren just mentioned. And you want to really focus on ask, partner, and then find. So we'll break these down. So ask, the key area to focus on if you're a fundraiser is asking your major donors for a donation only once a year. Now, this is different for smaller donors. You can ask them multiple times. You have a house file that you mail, that's fine. But for your major donors, you want to ask once a year. And that's for two reasons. One, it comes down to timing. And then the second reason is technique. So for timing, you want to ask your donors when they like to give. And if you look at the patterns of major donors, whether they are individuals who give, corporations, foundations, they tend to give on an annualized basis. So what you want to do is time your ask for when they're making their philanthropic decisions. So you kind of can figure this out on your own because you know, like if you have an existing donor, John Smith, he always sends in a check in the end of June. Well, you know that check's coming in. You probably want to meet with him, say 4 weeks before, when he's making his decisions. Maybe him and his wife talk over their philanthropic decisions that year. You want to meet with him like in mid-May. So the question might be then like, okay, how do you make sure you're lining up that meeting for mid-May? Well, you want to reach out a few, like either 6 to 12 weeks in advance to ask him to set up a meeting for mid-May. So that way, even the busiest person, the highest net worth individual who has a very packed calendar, if you're asking 60, 90 days in advance, you're going to get on their calendar. And then you're the last fundraiser who pitches him before they're making that philanthropic decision. So that's where like the timing really is critical. And just adjusting this one thing can really dramatically increase the donations because you're not pitching them after they've made all of their philanthropic decisions for the year. And then the second thing comes down to the technique. And this is all about really thinking about the donor and how they like to receive information. So you want to ask them with a persuasive pitch. And the higher the net worth the individual, the more likely they're used to seeing a lot of pitches. And we have this whole section in chapter 4 where we talk about Tarren had this experience with a donor where he was getting ready to pitch him, and the donor said, "That's great. I loved being pitched." And it's because for a donor, if you're managing a company, you've built, something large, you get pitched by vendors, by investors, by lots of people all the time. So you're used to hearing pitches, you're used to really analyzing people in that format and hearing information verbally and then making a decision. So if you come in with a persuasive pitch that lays out the work you do, kind of going into a little bit of detail, telling some success stories, and you do that in a compelling way, you're much more likely to get a big first gift or to get that big renewal. So that's ask. And we spent a little time on that, but we break down in the chapter 4 of the book, we break down how to build a pitch and walk you right through how to do that. But the second thing, and this was what Kevin was talking about, is with getting the donors to renew, is you really want to focus on partnering with your donors and treating major donors like partners in your organization. So this isn't that scene from Oliver Twist where the donor's up here and you're down here. That's not how major donor fundraising works in a functional and really positive way. How it really works is the major donor has money and they want to accomplish something really big. And then you're over here and you have time, talent, and staff who can get that done. Together, you're partners to do this. You're both on the same level, not one higher than the other, but it's a partnership. They want to accomplish big things. You can go do the big things with the resources. So really thinking of your donors like partners. And with this, you want to really focus on those donors who are providing the biggest amount of your nonprofit. So it's about really focusing on a core, like a small group of major donors who are driving, say, 80, 70, 80% of your total revenue. This is also a model that a lot of businesses use where they focus on just having a core group of key customers that they work with and they partner with for a really long time. I know I was talking with Kevin before the call, and he was talking about how this new business he's starting, 10X Strategies, that's what they're doing. They're looking for like six different customers to work with, nonprofits who are really mission driven, but he wants to focus on individuals and companies that want to really grow and expand. And so he's being very picky about that because he wants to have a portfolio of people who are all aligned. And that's the same idea you want to have with your nonprofit, is a core group of partner donors who are invested in the big vision of what you want to accomplish. And then the last thing is find. You need to add those new donors each year, and you can do that. We have a bunch of tactics that we talk about, but I was actually just talking with someone who read the book this morning, this guy named Jeremy, and he was saying how there's this one tactic we discuss in the book about using an existing donor to host a small private dinner at a restaurant in their neighborhood where they can invite a few of their philanthropic friends and do a small presentation. And they're going to start doing that now because it's a great way to extend the network of donors that you have, where they can invite, 2 or 3 couples. You can go to a restaurant, do a quick event, talk about the mission, give a pitch. It's a quick 2-hour dinner, and it only costs, maybe a few $100s, but you have a ton of upside by bringing on new major partner donors. So that's kind of the big picture with this. You want to focus on asking once a year with a persuasive pitch. And number 2, treating your major donors like partners. And then number 3, you want to add just a few new major partners each year that are like the donors you have and really understand your mission and the great work that you're doing.
Excellent, Trevor. Thank you. And I want to invite folks, if you want to raise any questions or challenges to Tarren or Trevor or me, put it in the chat and I'll try to address it. Tarren, back to you. Trevor mentioned time, treasure, and talent. That's always a huge constraint for us. How do you think about talent, and what would you recommend to us to think about how to apply those insights to our own organizations?
Well, I'm glad you asked about this because I think that it is one of the biggest conundrums in the development world of everyone's looking for that perfect unicorn, for that individual that's great in all aspects of fundraising. And the reality is that there's no unicorn out there. And the truth is that most of us, or practically all of us, are not great generalists, but we're particularly talented in a certain way. And so what you want to do is lean into those strengths that individuals have and create specialized roles in the fundraising world. So you can maximize this whole system and structure. And you might guess that we're going into kind of 3 different roles. You can tell we like this number 3, Kevin. But it's really about creating this kind of system. So here are the 3 distinct specialist roles in the fundraising world so that you can have an easy time finding great talent and grow your organization in a really scalable way. So the first role is the closer role. This is the person who actually makes the ask of the donor or the prospect. So if you're the CEO of the organization, you're a closer. You have to meet one-on-one with donors. You want to have that compelling pitch that Trevor talked about and make that ask once a year. And we have yet to meet a CEO who can't develop the skills to become a great closer. They already have the passion, otherwise they wouldn't be in the role. And so this is really just developing those skills to be a great closer. So that, and you can have other closers besides the CEO. So that's the first role. That person is making the ask, helping to grow the donors. The second role is that conductor. So think of like a conductor on a train. This is that detail-oriented person who's overseeing those internal systems. Trevor talked about how you are creating a partnership. You're not a supplicant, but you're a partner. Well, like any relationship or partnership, it needs to be managed. And how you treat people like partners, how you give them that 5-star level of service, how you keep them informed, not harassed, but informed about the organization, is you have a structure to that partnership. And so for a lot of organizations, this conductor role can be a part-time position initially, or you might even be able to add it to current responsibilities of an existing team member, somebody who's really great at this kind of project management and follow through. This is a really key role because just like a conductor keeps the trains moving on time, the conductor keeps those partnerships strong and manages that whole task of those 10 techniques of developing really a high-star level of service and partnership. And then the last role is what we call the connector. So this is the person who creates and manages that system for finding new donors. That Trevor talked about. This is that whole find strategy or adding in new donors. So the connector, he or she works to secure those referrals, makes new connections with some potential donors, kind of their target list or dream donors, who sets up those prospect meetings. And we go through, how do you make this really easy for somebody to say yes to an initial short call? Oftentimes, this role initially can be done by a really strong administrative assistant or executive assistant who already works within the organization. You want somebody who, when I, as the CEO, get a business card or somebody says, hey, you should really connect with so-and-so, this is the person I hand that information off to. I don't just create sort of a stack of business cards that I never follow through on. That's my problem. That's my confession. What you need is not a confession, but you need a connector who's going to follow through so that you can add in those new donors. So just like there are 3 different ways to grow revenue, there are 3 different strategies that align with those 3 levers of growth. There are 3 specialized roles that align with each of those levers. And the closer, the conductor, the connector are these 3 specialized roles. And what's great is everyone likes to be a specialist. Specialists have high value. They're well compensated. It's easy to find and bring in those individuals into your development shop. And so you're no longer frustrated by trying to find that perfect unicorn and then losing them rather to the next organization. Instead, you have these specialized roles that really complement each way you grow your fundraising.
Tarren, thank you. Tarren and Trevor Bragdon, your book, it's super. Again, you keep laying it out in these very simple frameworks. They're not easy, but they're simple and easy to apply, to think about, to conceptualize. And I can't recommend enough the accessibility of this book. It's a quick read, but it's really helpful. It's one that I think will serve as a good guidebook for you for a long period of time. And you may want to pass it along to others, your colleagues and others, if they're just getting started. I promised this to be a half-hour discussion. I have a number of questions in the queue. So Trevor and Tarren, if I can ask you to stay a few more minutes. If others have to jump off, I totally understand, but let's tackle a couple of questions. Trevor and Tarren, you all moved from the great state of Maine south. Trevor, you're living in Richmond, Virginia now, and Tarren, you're living in Florida. We have a question even further south. We have a caller who's asking from the great country of Chile in the southern hemisphere a question. He says, well, look, in the USA, you have a strong culture of giving. We don't have that culture necessarily. We have a smaller population. How do you think, A, we should think about encouraging people about giving generally as a form of engagement? And second of all, how do I take my cause to a group of donors? I know that big second question is a big one. However you want to tackle it, and then we'll move on to a couple more questions.
Sure, I can jump in, but Trevor probably has some thoughts as well. First of all, we've had a lot of international students and readers of the book. And so one of the things that I would say is you find philanthropic people all around the world. And the truth is, about 10% of donors give 90% of the money. And most money given away is from individuals. And so whether you're living in the US, the most generous country on earth, or whether you're living somewhere else, there's that same pocket of really philanthropic individuals. And usually they're known. What we've found is people who give towards organizations like your own also tend to give in other areas. Maybe that's they give politically. Maybe that's they give to museum or direct service or social service or education causes. But those individuals are out there and sort of known. And what you want to do is just get in front of them to make their case. I had a donor from California say to me years ago, it's much easier to make money than give it away. And I remember thinking, sounds like a nice problem to have. But in reality, he's right, because a lot of times people who want to contribute, they're just not aware of the good work going on. And so that's where you want to get a warm referral, get in front of that individual. But think about it this way. It's that 10% that give 90%. So you're really focusing on those 6 and 7 figure donors wherever you live.
All right, let me keep going on these questions. Trevor, I'm going to let you answer the next time as we answer some of these others. Another person asks, what are your thoughts on lists of names and purchasing donor lists? How do you get access to names that you should solicit for your cause?
So I think with lists, you want to be careful. Like sometimes they work really well, but the number of times I've heard from people, hey, we purchased this list of major donors in our area and we've done mailings to them and we can't get on their radar. We can't book appointments. That's a very common narrative that we've heard. So I think before I would purchase any list, I would do some of the activities we have in the book, like we call it, one of them is the dynamic dozen exercise, where you look at your top 12 donors, look at what they have in common, and also look for what are like the uncommon commonalities of your existing base of donors. And that will give you some insight into our donors are like this. Like maybe they all made their money in manufacturing. Maybe you should get a list of donors who made their money in manufacturing, like really being a lot more specific than just some of these, like this is philanthropic people in Pittsburgh. And, they might be philanthropic, but they might care about education and you're doing policy or something like that. So I'd be really careful about that and just being intentional. But the easiest way to grow and get new donors is to ask for a referral. And you want to only ask for your major donor for a referral of one. So you say something like, is there one person who's like you that we should reach out to about supporting our work? And when you ask for one, you're much more likely to get them to give you a name, and then you can follow up and say, what's the best way to connect with them? And then you're getting that personal referral. You can reach out and you're growing with donors who are like your existing base of donors.
Excellent. All right, a couple more questions. Next is caller says, look, I've got a number of 5 and 6 figure donors, but I struggle to get to 7 figure. What do you think is the key for me to take it to a higher level? Do matching gifts and challenge gifts work? Are those a helpful tool?
So I think if somebody has the capacity to write a 5-figure check, they have the capacity to write a 6-figure check more often than not. Somebody who's writing a 6-figure check has the capacity to write a much higher check, like high 6 figures, 7 figures. So in some ways, what I've found is we put more limitations on donors than they put on themselves. And I know for our 7-figure givers, they actually have a lot more capacity than what they're giving just to me. And I know, one of their top 5 charities. So one of the things you want to do is get out of your own head, first of all. And if somebody is over that 5-figure mark, particularly over that like $25,000 mark, they really have some significant capacity. And that gets to the first tactic that we talked about, which is grow, or how do you lay out that compelling vision of what would a bigger gift, what kind of impact would that accomplish? And what I've found is if you ask for more, worst case scenario, somebody will say no. They're not going to go back and give you less than they gave you last year because you asked for more. Sometimes it even opens the door to a conversation like, what would we have to do to become this kind of partner with you? And then have them map it out for you. I think a lot of times we overthink this, when in reality, what you want to do is lay out a big vision, excuse me, ask, and then have a conversation based on their response. And you'd be surprised. We've taken folks from 100,000 to 1 million in one ask meeting. So that was limitations I put on myself, not limitations the donor put on him or herself.
All right, excellent. Two more questions. First is I'm going to give it to Trevor, and that is going to be, person asks, look, we agree we need to add to our donors, but we just rarely have the funds to do that sort of thing. How do we think about this from a financial planning standpoint to ensure we can add donors? And then Tarren, the question to you is, someone asked, could you give us 3 or 4 sentences of how you make the actual ask? When you get to the point, what do you say? Trevor, I'm going to let you go first, and then Tarren, I'm going to let you close us out with the answer to that question. Trevor, how do you think about, from a financial planning standpoint, preparing to invest in adding donors?
So I think the key, if you're in a cash crunch where you need to bring in revenue quick, that's what it sounds like. You're not at the point where you can add on additional staff. If you're in that situation, I would spend a week or so really thinking through, how am I talking about the work we're doing? What's my big vision? And then put that together in a really persuasive pitch, like 6 to 8 minutes, about 750 words, where you can lay out, this is the problem that we're solving. Here's our unique solution. Then here's how it works. Like, here are the 3 steps. Tell them a success story, and then paint a picture of the big vision. Because a lot of times when we're in these places where we're at a cash flow crisis, it's because our donor, like, either our spending's outpacing our fundraising, but a lot of times it's just we haven't sold our donors on the big vision. So we're excited about the work. We know why we're doing it, but we haven't sold them. So I would really spend a lot of time really perfecting that pitch, and then go reach out to your existing donors, the ones who have been your longest supporters, and go pitch them with that and ask them to renew and increase. That's usually the best way to get money, in the short run faster, is because these are people you already have a relationship with. They're partners that you've worked with for a long time. And then lay out, like, here's the big vision where we can go 3 years from now if we partner together in a bigger way. We have a whole story in the book, opens up in chapter 1, where we talk about how Tarren did this really successfully and got the largest gift ever for their organization.
Great. Tarren, so close us out. Trevor mentioned the pitch. What would your pitch be? You can pitch me if you want. You're going to ask me for 7 figures. How would you frame up 3 or 4 sentences that main ask? Everybody sort of wants to know. I know it's not the silver bullet. We want to make sure everybody knows it's not a silver bullet, but how should people be thinking through the actual ask?
So great question, Kevin, and a great way to end. There's really 2 different strategies for this, and we go through this in the book. So one would be, if you're already a major donor, then in that 6 or 7, 8-minute pitch that Trevor talked about, the very last couple sentences of that pitch are the ask. And so you're already a really significant donor. I'm going to ask you for a specific amount, and then I'm going to stop talking. So I'm going to say something like this. Kevin, we've talked about how you can grow, keep, and find donors. And we'll be able to do this even more if more people read the book. And so what I'm asking you for is 30 minutes of your time with a webinar so we can get this message out. Will you give me 30 minutes?
That's a great way to frame it.
And then stop talking. And what you want is for the donor to fill that space. Now, if you were a prospect, say we'd never met before, I might say to you, that, using more fundraising language, I might say to you, you might not realize this, but at the Foundation for Government Accountability, we're majority funded by about 40 folks who give between $20,000 and $3 million a year. And in order to accomplish this big vision, we're looking to add another 10 folks giving at this major donor level. Will you be one of those 10? Or will you move up to become one of those major donors if they're already a smaller donor? And so you either use a range if you're trying to move somebody up or have them become a donor for the first time and explain how your organization is funded. Or if they're already a major donor, you ask for a specific amount. And we go through those scripts in the book. Great question.
And a great way to end. Thank you, Tarren. Well done. Trevor Bragdon, Tarren Bragdon, thank you very much. Seven-figure fundraising, strongly recommend it. Ladies and gentlemen, going forward, we're going to be doing these Zoom calls roughly once a week. There are a lot of topics to cover, a lot of demand for them. We're going to let you off the hook for Labor Day week next week, but after that, we're going to have a session on how to show up for a donor meeting and how to make that precise ask to go even deeper to what Tarren just offered. Also, how to run successful fundraising events, and also a little bit of an unusual topic, but an important one, how to order wine at a donor dinner. A very intimidating thing for many folks, but what should you do? You'll be hearing more and a lot more coming up. Thank you as always for joining us. And Tarren and Trevor, thank you as always. Appreciate all that you're doing. Let's all go out there and go big for our cause. Thanks a lot. Thanks for listening to the Going Big podcast. I hope today's conversation inspired you to take your fundraising and marketing strategies to a whole new level. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review on Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Pandora, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also watch all of our episodes on YouTube. And don't forget to follow us on social media and visit our website, 10xstrategies.com. That's TENXstrategies.com. for more great content and for free resources to help you go big with your leadership and with your giving. I'll see you on the next episode of the Going Big podcast.